good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Ehsas Udaipur and Ajmer, we welcome each one of you to the Right Circle event. We have amongst us Nidhi Dugar Kundalia, who's a young journalist, a graduate of School of Arts, City University, London, whose work has featured in various national newspapers and magazines. She has written on social cultural issues, documenting human lives and their journeys through urban and rural settings, and over the years, created a small body of work on the outcast and the disregarded, living on the fringes of society. Her consistent attempt is not to bring the margin to the center, but make it a place of reality. Her first book, The Lost Generation, published by Penguin Random House, was a chronicle of 11 dying profession remnants of India that still exists in old streets and neighborhoods, an unshakable sense of belonging to a time that was the everyday life of our ancestors. This book was released in 2016 and had an amazing warm reception. Nidhi's second book, White as Milk and Rice, was released days before the lockdown in March 2020, that weaves together prose, oral narratives, and Adivasi history to tell the stories of six remarkable tribals of Indian reckoning with radical changes over the last century as they were thrown together and then apart. It was none of them that fathomed. Nidhi lives in Calcutta with her husband and two children. Thank you so much for being part of today's Right Circle event. We're so honored to have you. And we have Dr. Nidhi Garg, another
Thank
Nidhi
you.
who's going to
Thank you.
be in conversation with our guest, the young journalist today. Dr. Nidhi Garg is an Ehsas woman from Bhubaneswar. She's a clinical and counseling psychologist, a life coach, a management researcher. She works as an advisor for Shrushti Academy of Management to promote women entrepreneurship. Thank you to both of you for joining us today. And let me over to now Dr. Nidhi Garg for questions.
Thank you so much, Swati. And first of all, heartiest congratulations, Nidhi, for both of your books that have been so well received by
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.
And what, when was the writer born in you, Nidhi?
First of all, thank you. Thank you for having me over. This has just been I've had a long association with Prabha Khaitan Foundation now, and what I've realized is Ehsas women are these little power packed packets lying and waiting to burst at the seams. Really excited to meet all of you all. So
Thank you so much.
when it comes to where the writer in me where the writer in me was born, am I audible enough? Am I
Yes, you are
loud enough?
audible.
Great. So, when it comes to that question, honestly, I don't think a writer in you can be born. What is the most important thing is that if you have something to tell, and if you're writing it honestly enough, that pretty much works. uh, and so I was a student of commerce because I did not know what else to do. So that's what I had decided to pursue. And while I was there, there was an opening for an internship, but I knew that college was just not enough for me. I had to do something more. And there was an internship at Times of India, and I signed up for that. Somehow I got it, and then I ended up working with them for the next 3 years of my college life. And that's when I realized, like, perhaps like journalism, perhaps things to do with people discovering their stories is what my calling is. And while I was doing that, one of the publishers approached me, and they wanted to they wanted to commission one of my columns for a magazine into a book. And that's how the author was born. um,
Okay. Wow. So that was The Lost Generation.
That was a lost generation. Yes.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, that's interesting to know that how from an internship to becoming an author actually, from a
Yeah.
commerce graduate.
Yes.
Okay, so how lost generation, let's talk about the lost generation, 11 dying professions that you have put in the limelight. How did you choose these 11 professions? What was your journey regarding this?
So, like I said, this used to be a column for one of her magazines that I was an assistant editor of. So basically, what I have spent a lot of time growing up with my grandparents, and we had this. We used to live in this old ancestral house, and there was this Godrej Almira there. So every time my grandmother would open that Godrej Almira, treasures would just spill out. There would be things like there would be a singer sewing machine. I'm sure a lot of us have seen that
Yeah,
while growing
yes,
up.
yes.
There was this there was a piece of ivory which was gifted to my grandfather by one of his friends. Then there was this little the strangest, and then there were these zari borders, and the strangest thing amongst all these treasures was this little ice cream scooper sort of a thing. And every time it would be out, and we'd be eventually like asking the question, what is this used for? And my grandmother would say that this was used to clean my children's ears. So
Okay.
and then she would tell me about the story of this street ear cleaner who would sit on the streets and clean the ears, and how she bought it from him. And then all these little stories would emerge. She would talk about this lamp lighter who would come in the evenings, light the lamps on the street with this big rod with fire at the end. Then in the morning he would come again, and he would have this flat end to that rod and put these lights off. um,
Mhm.
those and the rat catchers, and those and the phone operators, and lots of such stories. And somehow, and then when I moved to Calcutta, this was sometime I think in 2011, 12, when I realized that a lot of that India still exists, because Calcutta is sort of a city which is stuck in time. It's somewhere where no other cities, and everything that happens in the city is before your eyes. There is no cosmetic layer that sort of distinguishes the old and the redundant and the new and the modern, like it happens in most other cities. In Calcutta, everything is before your eyes, and I could see a bishti wala, I could see the ear cleaner, and lots of other such stories. And I realized like this India still exists, and it has to be documented. And then I started writing the column, but then that was just limited to Bengal. But then when the publisher approached me, she wanted me to do it pan India. So that's how Lost Generation.
Okay. Okay. And which was one of that profession that you feel should have still existed?
I get this question a lot, but I firmly believe that uh, iPods, that it's very difficult to revive cassettes in times of iPods.
True.
What is gone, it does. I mean, there is always this question of, let's preserve our culture, let's preserve what's heritage, let's preserve that little thing we have with associated with the past. But what we need to know is that most of these professions were deeply interlinked with the Indian caste system. Each so if on one hand, if you're asking for the caste system to go away, you are also, unfortunately, this is like the natural consequence. So
True. True.
for example, the Burakatha artists, who are the storytellers of Andhra. So these were these amazing singers, and they recite epics in the night to a huge audience in villages in Andhra Pradesh back then. The United Andhra I'm talking about used to be entertained and regaled by their performances. But then, somewhere along the way, TV and radios came in. They were still relevant. They were still used sometimes by a political party, to help them take their messages across. They were used by the health the health department of the government to send the messages across to the villagers. But at the same time, nobody had the time to sit and hear epics. So should they remain or should they go? If they go, the next job that they get to do is of garbage pickers, because they come from the lowest caste of the society, you know.
Oh,
So and they actually kill rats to survive in spite of having such a huge wealth of knowledge. But um but what do you do, like, some things, I mean, you keep trying to revive it. So either you adapt it and almost completely change its form so that it's suitable to the new generation, or you let it go and let the young generation be open to take to new things which other children's, let them be open to education, etc., instead of tying them down into that profession. So I guess, yeah, profession, it used to be passed on from father to son, uh, until a few decades ago. But now everyone does their own thing. Each individual makes his own choice. So I guess this is a product of globalization.
and was it difficult to get in touch with one of those professions? Was it difficult to find the 11 professions that you have chosen? Any one of them for interviewing or anything? Was it very difficult, or what was it equally difficult for all?
I mean, you could say like a few professions were more difficult in terms of language barriers. Number one, because I needed the help of a translator. Number two, hello, am I there? Am I audible?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, okay. Some professions were difficult in terms of their geographical locations because they were located in such complicated setups. Most importantly, the Rudalis. The Rudalis were located deep in the deserts of Rajasthan, and they were honestly very hard to. So, have you all has anybody heard of the Rudalis before? Do you know the premise which they emerged from? Is anyone am I audible? Sorry, because I cannot
Yes,
see
yes, we
anybody's
can
video.
hear you.
Okay. Great. So, so Rudalis basically emerged from one of these deepest jungles of deepest, if desert jungles of Rajasthan, and the basic idea for Rudali is that they used to mourn when someone in the village upper caste member died. They used to mourn for them, but the system of Rudali is pretty complicated because actually Rudalis are also mistresses of these Thakurs, and they still exist. So Thakurs will have their wives in their homes and mistresses on the borders of the village, who they can call on their whims and fancies. And when the Thakur dies, because the wife is from the upper caste and she has to maintain a certain code of conduct and cannot cry before the public, the Rudalis cry before them. And of course, like, if a Thakur has multiple Rudalis, they sort of need to fend for themselves. And if the Thakur ends up having any children with the Rudalis, they end up working as servants to the Thakur. So, uh, I mean, to talk to a Rudali, I sort of had to bypass the Thakur, which was very, very tough in case of in Kia. So, well, these were the complications. And of course, you had the Godna artists, which were in Jharkhand. We actually ended up bumping into the Naxalites, and the Naxalites asked us if they wanted to have a lunch with us, and they ended up roasting an entire goat on fire for us, and they were so disappointed when I told them I was a vegetarian. So,
Mm-hmm.
these were the little upheavals that came in terms of recording these stories. But then, I guess,
I'm sure when the readers have well received it, you feel everything was worth it.
ah, not really. More importantly, I mean, yeah, I mean, it always gives you pleasure that the readers, take it well and they enjoy it, etc. But what was more exciting for me was to, you know, to to document a part of history and like put it in paper there and make it like relevant, make it important, making something that's sort of like of use to other documenters, other scholars, for students, for other researchers. That
Mm-hmm.
gives me the biggest thrill, I think.
Great, great. Moving on to your new book, white as milk and rice. How did this one happen?
So I think I was in one of my journalistic assignments in Bastar, and there I saw a group of protesters, and they were protesting against a mining operation. And there was only one woman among these group of protesters, and she somehow seemed very intriguing, like full of power, but so like contained at the same time. So I ended up asking for her name and the name of her village because phones don't work in Bastar. It's very heavily controlled by the police since it's an accident infested area. So I took down the name of her village, and the next day we decided to visit her village, which was about a few hours on, I think, an hour and a half a car ride from Narayanpur in Bastar, and then another 1 hour on foot. So it was quite a while away, and when we landed at her village, we got to know that there was no one by that name. So I was quite surprised that why would she give us the wrong name? Like, we searched all morning, we searched every little hut of the village, even the fringes of the village. And finally, when we were returning disappointed, we were walking out, we realized that Birsu was just there, outside in the forest collecting firewood, and she was just as surprised to see us as we were to see her. And she said, I gave you the wrong name because I didn't expect you to come. A lot of people take down our names of our village, but nobody from the municipal corporations, nobody from the no councillor, no MLA, no politician, no journalist ever really comes down this far and this deep. So after that, we ended up interacting, and I was sieving through her story and took down notes over the next few days. And when I went back home, I wanted to know more about her tribe, which is the Marias. And when I was looking up, I realized that all the accounts that were available of the tribe was either like decorated dance drama, or songs, or something about the jewelry and costumes, or it was just the dismal conditions of their lives, but there was nothing about the who on a human level, who are these people, what do they feel. They've been taken out of their deep locations in forests and mountains after independence. Then they've been forced that their land and their forests have been taken away from them. How has this relationship changed from environment with each other, with outsiders? How have things changed? So I was very curious about that. I wanted to know stories of their lives, and that's when I decided to write. Although I was aware that I'm a non-tribal, I do not have a lifetime of immersion in the subject, but I still wanted to write down their stories so that people understand them on a human to human level. And that's why I decided to take up one person or two people from each tribe and talk about their lives, and through that weave in culture, life, history, geography, etc.
I remember reading this part that you went and you searched. You mentioned this in your book also, that
Hmm.
she gave you the wrong name and all. Which tribe intrigued you the most out of the six tribes that you have done?
It's like choosing amongst your babies, uh, but uh, I guess like they all have they own come with their own idiosyncrasies. India is such a vast nation. In every few kilometers, you will find a new culture, a new dialect, a new form of a new ideas, new ideology. So I mean, sometimes I wonder, how does one PM govern the entire nation, because all their needs are so different from each other. So it's very difficult to choose. But then for me, what was most challenging, so that hence it gave me the most satisfaction, was the Kudumbas of Nilgiris, because these Kudumbas are actually rebels, and they practice guerrilla warfare, etc. And they live in the Nilgiri forest, and they've recently emerged, and they were infamous for being sorcerers. Now we don't know whether that's true or not, but getting the story out of them, getting them to talk, was a big challenge. So yeah.
Okay, okay. And what do you think is the real purpose behind uh, talking about these six tribes? And there are so many other tribes also, I'm sure which you couldn't cover, and you feel that, oh, I wish I could have covered a few more. Or you still want to do another book on that? Or do you have any such plans?
No, not. I mean, I do not have any such plans, definitely. But then there was no real purpose. Like I said, it was to document, what could have been lost otherwise. In just it'll become an obscure entity in sometime in the part of the history, because it's not been written down. Because whatever available material we have about the tribes has all been written by these Western scholars before independence. So after independence, very less has been recorded on a human level. So, for example, we have these Khasi sisters from Shillong. So these Khasis are a tribe which basically is a matrilineal society, but not a matriarchal society. Now, what do you mean by that? So a lot of people look up to this society saying that, oh, women are so empowered because a man comes to her house after marriage and not the other way around. So that's how it's a and the woman is the one who inherits the wealth from her mother, and the mother inherits from the grandmother, and so on and so forth. Now that's a matrilineal society, but at the same time, when it comes to taking decisions, such as when the panchayat meets and the decisions are taken, they're all taken by the men. When when the woman has to pass down and divide the wealth amongst her daughters, it cannot be done without the permission of her brother or her mama. So, ultimately, I mean, you may call it a matrilineal society, but still not a matriarchal society. It's a very much a patriarchal society. So, the women, in fact, are so burdened by it. Like the two Khasi sisters who I had interviewed, they were, uh, they were, they've just had a household of just women. There've been no men in the family because their grandfather, he died of some disease. Their father, he left his wife and got married to someone else. uh, One sister's husband has taken to alcohol and drugs, and hence they've separated. The younger sister refuses to get married. So it's a very complicated setup because the men do not associate the men do not feel the need to earn, and hence they end up like taking to alcohol and drugs more easily because it's a women's parents who is serving ultimately. So for him to the primal need to earn to fend for his family is gone. So the women are in fact playing the roles of both housekeepers as well as the bread earners. So the bread earners and bread makers both, and that actually is a bigger burden, and they cannot wait to cast away this burden. They're like, we rather be a patriarchal society. So so it was important for us as because the times are changing very swiftly in the past few decades. So all this is going to be changing rapidly too. So it was important to capture these stories into one place, so that it's important
Okay.
because this helps
This
us
is,
understand the changing India.
I'm sure. And a lot of work and the culture that we know is basically lies in the oral culture, in these tribes and all. So, because you didn't know the language, how difficult it was, because you always had an interpreter with you
Right,
wherever you went and you interviewed them.
right.
So, how was that as an experience? Do you think there was information that was being lost or camouflaged or missed? Because
So, luckily, I know a few more languages. I mean, I'm fluent with say 5 or 6 languages.
oh, that's
So
that's
that really works in my favor. But then, of course, a lot will be lost in translation. But that does not mean you do not translate. So it was important to get whatever you could. I mean, I did end up like going through the layers through cross-checking facts, data, information from other people who are familiar with the language, etc. But mean, there is no doubt that a lot was lost in translation because, for example, look at the Marias of Bastar, the tribe. So, the reason we documented this tribe was because they have practiced a very interesting system called the Ghotul system. So, the Ghotul is basically an adult dormitory, where a children's dormitory, where in the evenings, these young adults between the age of 12, 13, 14 years old, after a full days of work, they end up hanging out there. And of course, apart from dancing, singing, and playing games, they also indulge in sexual practices before marriage. So, this is all with the permission of the adults of their villages. And but when it comes to marriage, and no partner can sleep with the other partner for more than 3 days. And when it comes to marriage, they ultimately end up marrying the person their parents decide, and they're happily doing that because they've already experienced what it is to be in a relationship which does not have a future, or which where a lot of things uh, that come with the arranged marriage setup have not been taken care of. So the risk associated with the love marriage, they've understood that, so they rather marry the person that parents have chosen. So
And this section, that teenagers from Maria tribe and today's live-in relationship. Would you like to throw a light on that?
yeah, I'm just we're just discussing that. So so they'd rather go for arranged marriages setup, and most of them do, apart from like a few sporadic cases here and there. um so it was important, for so but this Marias, because they're living so much in the present, that they do not really have a term for a future. So when you say, we have, they all they understand is today, the trees, the sky, the weather now, and what my life is now. So they hardly have any terms, words for future. So, now imagine putting that into English, and working with that sort of shortcoming. So, a lot is lost, of course, but then I guess we must pursue in spite of that.
It's such an advanced thinking, I feel that this tribe has, which
Actually,
even
there
to,
are a lot of such tribes, not only in India but across the world. There are a lot of such tribes. This is all a Western thought. Most of these Indian tribes used to practice nudity. Most of them used to indulge in polyandry, like a woman marrying multiple men, or men marrying multiple women, or indulging in sexual practices before marriage, Kama Sutra, all of that. All this is actually old Eastern tradition, but it's just when the Westerners started coming in and they started invading, they are the ones who brought shame and guilt with these things. For the Naga, the Konyaks. So the Konyaks, the stories in my book, they are the headhunters tribe from Nagaland. So they would head hunts to increase the men's strength in the tribe. So if they were also very territorial, and that's why they would head hunt. So for them, more the number of heads a man took, the stronger, the bigger warrior he was. Neme is what they call it. So now they are they would want to. They've been killing people for years now, and this was when after independence, when the or just before independence, when the Christian missionaries started coming to these areas. They are the ones who induced that guilt in them, that you have to wear more clothes, you can't just walk around in a loin cloth, you have to stop hunting heads. They started doing they started splitting them as groups, as the warrior groups, and the community system that they worked with was fascinating. So they stopped all of that. So this is very Eastern tradition, but then it's the Westerners who have changed this over years.
I'm sure. uh, you have also mentioned about Sukri from the Halakis of the Kola tribe, where you have mentioned that she wanted to use the pen, paper, study, but she gets married.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah. So do you think that they want to? We are we are taking it from a perspective where these tribes are dying out, and do you think they want to be modernized and they want to be in the so-called mainstream? where education and everything. And what did you feel? Was it only this Akola tribe, or did you feel there's something similar for the other tribes as well? The
See,
youngsters,
uh,
basically.
the thing with halakis, basically the reason halakis intrigued me was because they're a very very hardworking tribe, right? So especially the women, in the morning they're in the forest, collecting forest produce such as berries, wood, etc. In the afternoon they're working in other people's fields. In the evenings they're at the market selling whatever they've collected from the forest. Later in the evening they're tending to their cattle, and then they, of course, their household chores and children before they retire to the bed. Now their days are so long and so hard, so to forget the mundaneness of it all, to forget the pain that comes with such hard labor, they sing. They sing to they sing to forget all of that, and they have a song for everything. So Sukri was one such halaki woman. She actually is a Padma Shri winner, by the way. So Sukri started out in she so she so when she got married to this really old guy who was 40 years old, 30, 20 years older than her, and then he the two children that she had with him, they passed away. Then he passed away. Then she adopted a son who also died to alcohol. So she has seen a lot of tumult in her life. But then the fact is that these tribes are on brinks of change. Now they neither belong to the forest and the deep mountains, nor do they belong to the mainstream society. So that's the reason they feel the need for education, so that they get that education and they get better jobs, or their children have better jobs, etc. But actually, if you speak to the tribals who still live in the deep forest and the deep jungles and mountains, they are quite content with the way their lives are. They have access to best water, best medicine in forms of herbs and food. The amount of knowledge they have of the environment is immense. They work in complete sync with the environment, with the daylight, with the nighttime, with moonlight, with seasons, with food, with taking exactly what they need from the environment, not a little more, not a little less. And the environment
It
also is
was
very
also
gentle.
mentioned that they know the medicines for AIDS, but they don't want to share it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So I don't know again how true that is, but then that's what they say. So a lot of such things, and so they really work in tandem with the environment. Now, but what happened? That's a reason. But so it's only these tribes which have been forced to come out. Where development has happened in that part of place, or there is a road that's been extended to those corners. They are the ones who feel the need for more. Otherwise, they are quite content where they are.
Okay. And uh, it's good to be content. That's all we. I think we all are. Even I, as a psychologist, I'm teaching to be content.
True.
And moving on to the next question. How well receiving were these tribes? You did mention about Bisru, and
Mm.
but how was it on an overall? Were they opening up easily, or was it a struggle getting there only, or was it a struggle making them open up and share their stories?
Right. So, in some cases, actually, in most cases, it was difficult. Firstly, because they're not used to media attention. Secondly, because they all want to retell their story in their own way. In the sense, if say a tragedy has happened to them, they do not wish to speak about it, or they if because they've been, say, for example, these sorcerers. So for years they've been discriminated against because are ye to jadoo tona wala aadmi hai, sort of a person. So so they would try to project that that's completely untrue, or that's just a speculation, or that's a rumor. So they would try to project that. So for them to actually speak the truth, and not change their life according to their own notions, that was very difficult for me. And also, of course, to cross check facts and data. A lot of times people forget uh, what had happened or the timeline of the events, or if you ask another family member, he would have this, he would interpret the same circumstance of the situation in a different way. So there were a lot of these challenges. um, Someone will just tell their story, but then to dig in deeper, to bring out layers, so to talk about, say, a case of a history of molestation, like Birsu was molested in the Gotul once. So to talk about that, for the Khasi sisters to talk about their drunk father, for the Kanjar. The Kanjars or Chambals were basically gangsters who were they used to be soldiers with the Rajput's army, and then when the Muslim invaders came in around 10th, 11th, 12th century, they were pushed into the forest, and there they started learning how to loot just as a means of survival. And now they are, just until 2012 they started surrendering. 2002, 2003 they started surrendering, but before that, all these dacoits of Chambal, those were Kanjars, the tribe called Kanjars. So for them to speak about their past of looting, their past of murdering people, so all that is tough. These are tough. One of my one of these kids, he was in brothel. He sort of like was in brothel for a while to speak about that. So everyone has their own way of interpreting the same bit of history, but I guess you need to see through it.
We have just celebrated Women's Day. And how do you think women's are positioned in all the six tribes that you have written about?
See,
How
one
are
thing
they
I see
positioned?
common, yeah. So one thing I see common amongst all these tribes, whether it's from north, south, east, west, is that increasingly the men are taking to substance abuse, and the women are the ones who are working hard throughout the day. So increasingly, I see that as a trend, and that the reason is traditionally these women were very in Indian tribe, amongst the Indian tribes, and the men and women had quite an equal space. They did have defined social roles. Say the men would hunt and they would gather food, or they would fight wars, and the women would be the ones cooking, and they would be the ones going to the forest and collecting fruits and vegetables. So they did have defined roles, but they did not mean in any way that the women were forced to do what they did not want to do. They were quite liberated that ways. But as trends change, as they started integrating with the mainstream society, the men have been getting more and more frustrated because they were losing their main sources of income. They've been losing, hunting used to be one of their popular modes of gathering food. So they've lost that. Uh, they have lost. They are treated badly by the people they work under, because they don't traditionally have their lands, because they've emerged from the forest and so they don't have, traditionally they do not have their lands. So uh, that's how it is. So the men have increasingly taken to substance abuse, while women have you know been struggling to feed their families, and hence looking for means of subsistence.
Uh, and my last question to you would be, how is Nidhi beyond that we know, beyond the journalist, beyond the writer? How is Nidhi more than what we know on the papers, on the
Gee,
magazines?
I haven't given so much thought to myself, but then, I'm a mother of two kids. I love spending time with them. They're really small. Like one is 4, the other is 1. So I love spending time with them. I come from a huge joint family while growing up. I'm close to a lot of these members, but then it's been a constant battle of how it is in joint families. You are expected to um, mold yourself in a specific fashion.
Mm,
So,
fashion,
but
yeah.
in spite of being close to all of them, there's been that constant struggle of carving your own identity. So I guess all of that does reflect in my writing somewhere. But Generally, I'm very I like having a good time, you know. I like talking to people coming from different kinds of backgrounds, you know, especially the fringe society members. They intrigue me because they have such beautiful stories to tell. So um, I think I'm a constant dreamer. I'm always telling stories, even when I'm not writing books. So
That's
that's
amazing.
me.
That's amazing. Lovely talking to you, Nidhi. It
Thank
was
you.
so insightful knowing
Oh, the
everything.
pleasure was all mine.
Thank you so much. Can I invite over Swati to take over? Yes, Swati. You,
Hi,
yeah,
hi.
hi, hi.
It
Hi,
was
hi,
so
Swati.
wonderful listening to both of y'all. Absolutely enlightening. I have one
Swati.
question from one member of the audience for you, Nidhi Dugar. The question is, what is the most important strength for a woman? Physical strength, emotional strength, mental strength, or financial strength?
I think it has to be all three, you know. Increasingly, we have realized, I personally used to just have the emotional strength. But over years, I've realized so that, I mean, to multitask, to do, because ultimately I'm also a caregiver, you know, so to give care, you need to have a lot of physical strength as well. So definitely that, but more also very importantly, financial strength. I mean, I could say that money doesn't matter much, but ultimately, I think when you're financially independent, you are making your own choices. Then, I mean, as soon as you because I felt that, you know, before I gave birth to my first child, I was always earning my money, and after I gave birth to my first child, suddenly I was not earning my money and I was dependent on my partner. And uh, and that's when it hits you. I mean, you're asking for money from someone else. I mean, although I have a wonderful partner, he's caring, giving. He gives me space. We give each other space, very importantly, to do whatever we want to um, do with our own lives. But at the same time, just asking money from someone else makes things very, very complicated. So the first step towards carving your own identity is financial, and I feel like somewhere along the way, emotional and physical come along too.
Thank you. Is there any member of the audience who has a question? I think we have Vinita Jain. Vinita Jainji, would you like to unmute and ask your question? We'd like you to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you
Hi,
are.
Hi. Hello, Nidhi. Hello,
hi,
Dr. Nidhi.
Vinita.
And hi, Swati, and everyone else listening in. Um this has been a very, very interesting session. One can't really imagine how much it must have taken out of you to go to the interiors of the country and to unearth literally the lives and document the lives of these tribes. And so, thank you for this extremely enlightening session, I can say. Um, what I was wondering was definitely it changes you as a person, right? Uh,
Hmm.
During your travel and whatever you experience, um, were there any incidents where you were scared or fearful, or was it always that you were received well despite whatever little differences here and there?
Honestly, for my first book, this was before I had my kids.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't care about my life much, you know. I mean, I was quite a daredevil, like doing whatever I wanted to do. But
Okay.
then, for my second book, by then I realized there were like two little things dependent on me, and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you start caring about your life a lot more. So I
Correct.
guess that did change in the first book, I remember the Thakur that I was speaking about. He had this little gun on his waist, and he was constantly massaging it while he was speaking to me.
Okay.
Then the in the second book, again in Bastar is full of Naxals. So I was taking a lot more precautions. Say for example, I reported myself at a police station before I walked into the jungles. I was constantly in touch. I had my red pepper spray, etc., in my bag, and a lot of other such things. So I was also, you know, what's also curious is that I mean, becoming a mother also sensitizes you to a lot of their issues. So
Right.
somehow I could like gauge their feelings deeper, like the rawness, the insecurity, the
Absolutely.
anger, the frustration. It's sort of I just became a lot more sensitized, and
Right.
it was no longer an interviewer and interviewee. It was someone empathizing with them. So
Yeah.
that also like sort of uh, catches you off guard, and you're like you become more aware of the circumstance and the situation you are in.
Correct.
So that
Correct.
also is a scary thing to be in. But I guess like you have a goal in mind and you're working
Yes.
towards that, and you've got to do what you got to do.
Absolutely. One more thing, despite the differences, the local cultural differences of the tribe, their apparel, their food, there are so many differences on so many various levels. Uh, did you feel there was some kind of a uniting factor that was running, uh, sort of maybe uniting India? Was there something, or they are just on their own, they are separate entities everywhere,
They
and
are definitely separate entities. The more I travel uh, in these boondocks, the more I realize that India was never meant to be together as one nation. It was meant
mm-hmm,
to be small kingdoms, probably
mm-hmm,
converting into state.
right,
I mean, thanks to Vallabhbhai Patel, we did come together as one India. But then the fact is that the needs of each tribe, each, I mean, at one end you have these Naga tribals who,
yes,
and all they care for is monkey brains and monkey blood. At the same
correct,
time, you have these gentle Hallaki tribals
barabar,
who all they care for is education. So
yes,
the changes, they so vastly vary from region to region, that the only uniting factor I saw amongst them was humanity,
okay,
honestly, and nothing
okay.
else.
Oh, that is a lovely sentiment, and I think you have, you know uh, got the crux of the matter, basically.
Thank you.
And so, on my part, from my side, I would like to congratulate you for
Thank you.
documenting
Hmm.
this, because this is extremely, extremely important information. And people for generations to come will be, going back to your book and trying to piece together the present time that you have sort of documented.
Yeah.
So, heartiest congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vinita ji, for that wonderful interaction. Would anyone from the audience like to ask a question? Okay, I have one for Nidhi. Nidhi, I feel that we often showcase and highlight uh, the pathetic state of women in villages or tribal areas, but there's not too much difference even in urban areas. In urban areas, that we may live in fancy houses, and we may have a very very social lifestyle, but deep down, there is a long way for women to still break the glass ceiling. What do you think about the same?
Definitely. I mean, the struggle for women, and increasingly I see men also, is, I mean, it's getting more difficult as we're jostling for space, as we're jostling for our identities. Things are definitely getting more complicated, and with things, I mean, for women, with the kind of histories we've had, with the kind of histories of being subjugated or sidelined we've had, we of course have it a lot more difficult. But I feel biggest hindrance in the way of a woman becoming bigger are the matriarchs of the families and the societies, and not the men. Because I don't know, this is my observation. Because it's not the men who are pushing the men down, women down. It seems to be women who push the women down. So that has to change for us as a society, for women to, sort of emerge stronger. And there has to be there has to be a little more unity when it comes to, or there has to be a little more, uh, you have to derive strength from your education, from your belief, from your sisterhood, from your fraternity, to carve yourself. But then, to document that is probably someone else's job, not mine, because uh, I have not yet you know hit upon a story that I want to tell amongst these women. I'm sure they're very beautiful stories around, of urban slums, of women living in mansions, um, a lot of women everywhere. But then, one day, perhaps.
Lovely. Would anyone like to unmute and ask a question? Okay, while you all are thinking of your questions, I have one question from Mr. Rao, which says that you are a mother of two children
Mm-hmm.
and parenting has never been an easy job. So, to bring about gender neutral kids, especially in an Indian society where men often look down upon women and children are seeing that, where patriarchy exists in the household,
Right.
how does today's parent counter that in big joint families?
I think it's a constant battle. Um, you are you not only have to be setting examples for them as kids, but then you also have to be. And I'm lucky, honestly, to have both one boy and one girl. So for me, it's easier to prove a point. Like, I get them to do the same activities. I get them to wear gender neutral clothing. I do not make any discrimination in the sense like, I'll probably encourage my daughter to play sports as much as I'll encourage my son to do arts and craft. So little things like that, also like setting an example where like both me and my husband are sharing our duties. Like he's equally responsible for parenting my children as much as I am. My work timings are far worse than his. So my kids get that and they know, like, mom may not go to office, but she's working, and this is a sacred space, and this is, I need to value that. I value it very highly, so automatically they value it too. So I guess like you also need to lead a life by examples, and kids automatically soak it all up. But someone has to um, someone has to suffer in you can't have it all. You can't have great relationships with your family and breaking barriers. Doesn't work that way. I mean, I'm lucky that I do have a good relationship with my family. They've somehow grown with us. While we were growing up, they also grew up. We've been lucky with in that regard, but I'm aware of a lot of families who are stuck in a time warp, and it gets difficult for them to understand change. So in that case, you need to shake things up a little, I think. So,
Yes, absolutely. Point taken. Actions speak louder than words, and it's important to be exemplary at home for your children to follow suit. The last question for today, and by Mrs. Arora, is what do you have to say about the Harry Meghan controversy and the interview which happened with Oprah Winfrey? Do women sometimes use race to score brownie points or popularizing for the wrong reasons?
ouch. I honestly have zero opinion about this. I'm sorry, but then not because I've not been following that story. I mean, it is interesting, juicy gossip to follow up on. But then, how do you know what's the truth and what's not? How do you see through it? because what media feeds you is so, it really, each media has its own agenda. And trust me, I've been a part of a media. So I know like they work according to their agenda. Like some media organizations would be pro royal, some would be like pro the couple because, well, they are like, there they are, because they want to prove themselves that they are fighting against racism, etc. Some people want to prove that they are, they are they are they pride heritage and legacy more than, they pride that above everything else. So every media has this agenda. It's very hard to choose between the right and wrong here. So that's the reason I don't think I can give an opinion on this. I mean, to give a public opinion, this I may have my own opinions.
Thank you so much. That was such a lively, candid, interactive chat session. Thank you on behalf of Ehsas Udaipur and Ehsas Women of Ajmer. We are so happy you could be part of the Right Circle. We wish we could do this in person, but hopefully, once we fight the COVID war and we come out stronger, healthier, we would have you in person. Thank you so much, Dr. Garg, for moderating this session. Members of the audience, we are ever so thankful to you and the media. Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having me
you.
over. Maybe, I mean, if you're on Instagram, please do follow me. I do end up posting a lot of information there. And let me know what do you think of the book after you read it.
Lovely. For the audience, could you just tell us what your Instagram handle is? So easier for.
It's Nidhi D Kundalia.
Lovely. Thank you so
Thank you.
much, and
Thank
lots
you
of
so
more
much.
power and success to you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you,
Thanks,
Swati.
Esas. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having me.
everyone.
Thank you, Kalva Ketan Foundation. Bye bye.
Thank you.